Yes, I'm really glad to be here. Thanks to the audience as well. And if that's okay with everybody, I'd like to shoot Marieke our first question I've prepared, and we sort of agreed on. I'm not going to shoot anything that we haven't prepared properly, but I guess Mettle. Marieke, can you tell us what Mettle is and what's your role in Mettle? What's your typical day as a CEO?
Yeah, sure. So Mettle is a digital business bank by NatWest, and we basically do very simple business banking for sole traders, very small limited companies, and what is called today the passion economy. So what's happening, and it's been accelerated by COVID, is that people are basically making a living differently, and you have time and you might want to sell something on Etsy or not. And therefore there is this whole rise of making an income differently that doesn't fit the traditional business banking model. You can't wait for 6 weeks to have a business banking account. You need something that is much faster. And so that's what Mettle do. And at Mettle, we are owned by NatWest, and we'll talk about that, but which means that we are basically running exactly like a FinTech, but with the backing of a very large bank. Which is the best of both worlds when it works and when it comes together.
Of course.
And so at Mettle, I'm the CEO, which means I'm basically in charge of driving the business forward and making sure that we drive the growth and we make the right choices for our customers.
Absolutely.
But we said we were making that really about a fireside chat. So tell me more about Tymit actually, and your role at Tymit and how you came to it.
Of course. So Tymit is my partners, particularly Martin, used to be at Bain for a very long time and used to advise Citi and Amex and other big card issuers. And he found, due to his research, that the lending or the borrowing rather aspect of the credit card was broken. People didn't like to borrow in a credit card. And so he effectively quit Bain and set out to launch this new reinvented credit card that works in installments. Installments are so popular these days with the buy now pay later players, but I think we have something in between our hands because we can see that from the product market fit early on, people relate a lot to installments and the way we have structured the borrowing in our product. So and how I joined, look, I'm an investment banker by background, put my hands up in the air like that. And Martin and Juan and Nico, my partners, were looking to structure debt to fund the book at the time. So I was exactly doing that at Santander for forever, ever since the MBA, really.
Yeah, I remember that. You were the banker. I'm never going in the bank. And now we swap paths.
Exactly. So, but just to wrap that up, I effectively lent pro bono advisory services to them for 6 weeks. I remember capping that timeline to say, yeah, this is my time. It's worth a lot. I'm going to allocate 6 weeks only to you for free. But then I ended up, meeting them better. They met me in a different way, working together. We closed the deal and then eventually landed a head of finance and then over to CFO, where I'm now. So, yeah. But over back to you. I'm interested to know how big is Mettle these days? How many are you?
Yeah, so it's a team of 200 people. And we've basically, that's been an interesting journey, right? Because when I joined, so Mettle was already set but not launched. And it was a team of 80 people, mostly consultants and contractors. And so there was something almost like a gem in the making, but not really like, a team and a product and something you can launch. So today it's a team of 200. We have a lot of engineers. 80% of the team are engineers and products. So it's a lot around what we build and how we can build that, because what we also on a journey to build is actually a cloud-native banking platform, which is modular and state-of-the-art, which is actually really important, as you would know, in the banking world. There are very few of those, and when you're actually running on legacy technology, your costs are higher, and therefore you can't serve customers which look smaller in a way, but which are actually a very, very growing base. So Yeah.
Because you also had Bo, didn't you?
Yes. So when I joined, it was to lead Mettle, and then in February last year, I actually also took on Bo, and so NatWest had two digital banks. So one was Mettle, focused more on the smallest end of SMEs, and Bo were focused more on retail. And doing one digital bank is already very, very hard. Doing two is extremely hard. And COVID hit, and we needed to make choices and make sure that we actually had the best path forward with one team, one technology, and basically focusing on one segment that we really believe in. So I basically led the restructuring of that and closing the Bo brand.
Was it difficult conversations to?
It's always, it's never easy to have to restructure or to do things quite differently, right? So that's definitely never easy to have to handle. But I think also I'm an optimist, so I think it's also extremely formative, and the best thing you can do for any business and even for your people is to have a very clear direction of one place where you're going, right? So in hindsight, I don't necessarily look at that as the best months of my life, to be honest.
Sure.
But there is something to be learned in that, and the business is much, much stronger thanks to having made those choices and being able to focus. And today Mettle is an absolutely loved app. Our engagement is stellar. We keep getting feedback continuously. You talked about that also for Tymit, right? Like the product market fit is something that's so special, and how you get that is really, really difficult. But what about Tymit? How many are you guys?
We've got 60 people. Again, like you say, 60% or 70 is engineers. Every one of our engineers is based out of Madrid, which is a strategic decision. We have big ties to Madrid and Spain. There's a lot of talent.
Yes.
The market is not as hot for engineers as it is in England, and people like to stay. They choose a company and like to stay. Whereas we felt London is much more of a, you're competing against the big guys, right? Revolut, Curve, all these new names that are coming up based in the East End, and they're sweeping all the talent there is. So I think that worked well in that sense.
I think it's super smart, because you're right. There is and we can see it with the COVID transition, working from anywhere. Like we all need a lot of technological talent, back-end engineer, front-end engineer, all that. And it's actually really, really difficult to make sure that you can keep that talent in a world where you can take your laptop, work from anywhere. And I don't blame people for wanting to work from Madrid with an amazing weather. But we've seen that also, like the market is heating up for talent. And it's really important, therefore, to have a very strong culture where people want to work for your product, believe in the mission of what you're doing, in your ways of working, and you can help people have the right balance also, which is never...
Listen, talking about career paths, I'm going back to your MBA essays. Did you picture yourself 10 years after being CEO of a bank?
Not at all, and we talked, that's the fascinating thing, because so I wrote in my MBA essays that I wanted to work in consulting after the MBA, and then my ambition was to become probably something like, leading strategy for Nike or something like that, because I love sports, and that's what I wanted to do. And actually, I did work in strategy consulting right after the MBA, and that was not really for me. I love doing things. I'm an operator, and what I could see is that in consulting, it's very strategy. You actually do the slides, you work with amazing people, but then you let others implement it. And I was like, well, I want to stay. I want to do that.
The principal versus agents.
Exactly. And so that was not necessarily for me. So I think, thinking about your career and where you want to go, it's not necessarily that. But I remember, in the MBA, because we were talking about that just before, you were part of the bankers. So there was a group of the bankers. So for you, it's a different, what did you write in your essay? Do you remember?
I was all about trading and capital markets and bond issuance, and I dreamt with my big screens on the trading floor, which is where I ended up. After the MBA, until I joined Tymit, I spent 10 years at a trading floor, very boozy, noisy, and all the jargon you can think of. I was reviewing prospectuses and closing wholesale transactions, like nothing to do with placing a credit card with a consumer and understanding the tone of voice to speak to that consumer. So all this marketing jargon, I had to learn it really when I landed in this job. Commercial finance, understanding. I'd like to do a DCF for a bit of a projection at least of the financials of every vendor we hire, to decide based on numbers what's the best result we're looking for, as well as on technical capabilities. Of course, our CTO will say, yeah, this is a better that or this, but the commercial terms for me are very important, and that was something that I was used to modeling a lot, but returns on investments and other things, not quite commercial relationships. So
yeah, but it's quite interesting, right? The way you think about your career when you're earlier on in your career, and you may or may not have this grand idea of what is right, and then I think life throws opportunities at you, and if you can actually grab them. I've actually changed a lot of my philosophy on that. I think it's more about being open to opportunities and finding the fit of what makes you actually happy, right? Because at the end of the day, my dream was consulting, and I was not fulfilled in that job, right? I could do it, but it was just not me, right? And then I jumped and I worked for Expedia, which was a completely different culture. But I think it's a big learning, right? Which sometimes when you're earlier on in your career, you look at that and you're like, well, I want to, hit this marks or have that big idea, and it might not be actually what you.
This anecdote I have and I like telling is when I was made redundant at Santander, big shock. At the end of the day, one can argue you're very highly paid, and therefore there's more chances that at some point it's a numbers game. You make it made redundant. My job wasn't existing anymore in London. You transferred to Madrid, so I didn't want to go. So I need to go. Basically, pretty much no tears. Even. There's no room for tears. Fine. I went back to LBS, to the career center, and they made me draw. The career advisor there made me draw a timeline and 0 at the bottom and 10 on the right-hand side, as in 10 years. Where do you want to be in 10 years' time? Little balloon. Yeah, I think I wrote CFO in, I can't remember. I was big about FinTech at the time. When I left Santander, even at Santander, on my training floor, I was earning big money and I was doing well for my job and everything. Family was well, fantastic. But all these buzz coming from the East End, where valuations were skyrocketing, fintechs where neobanks were coming on, and we were legacy banks. Santander is the legacy bank, if you think about it. I was envious and itchy and guilty of, I felt all those feelings when I came off that. I said, right, I want to go into fintech now, or tech. It doesn't matter. Maybe it's upstream payments or something like that, but it has to be related to financial services and payments. And I drew the CFO box in fintech. I think I even named it, and then write words around it, like a cloud of words or brainstorming about what does that bring, benefits and drawbacks. And then she made me do an intermediate step in 5 years' time, where you need to be in 5 years' time to get to CFO of a fintech in 10 years' time. Well, like you said, it was lucky for me. It was during my garden leave, I met Juan, who is INSEAD MBA, who introduced me to Martin, who is a Columbia MBA, and we got chatting, and I was away. But it's super lucky.
But I don't know if it's lucky, because I think the exercise you did is you paint this picture of what you want, and then you also said something really important, which is you make those connections. And I think, when we talk about how do you, I get that question a lot. People ask me, how do I get a job in fintech? And I mean, I can share how I landed my first job in fintech, but I think it's really a lot about connections. Sometimes it's a chance. And you also said something, you worked for 6 weeks for free. You gave a try to that and you prove your value. And then, because sometimes smaller companies can be like, it's risky to take you on. I don't know. Can you work with us or not, right? I got into fintech in a slightly different angle, but also quite by chance and by luck. But
was this Circle?
Yeah, it was Circle. So I was working at Expedia, and I absolutely loved my time at Expedia. I was working for Hotels.com and had a stellar career, amazing team, great business growing. And I got a call from a headhunter to work in crypto. And at the time, crypto was not what we think of crypto today. At the time, in my head, immediately I was thinking, oh my God, this is for drug dealers. I'm not interested. So I hang up. And the guy insisted, and I actually started reading about crypto and blockchain. And I thought, oh my God, this is huge, right? Like what's going to happen in crypto and blockchain is just fantastic. And so I took the call, and I met the founders of Circle, who are absolutely amazing, and it was not their first company. And then I thought, oh wow, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to basically, follow founders who've done something already, know what they're doing, and
then you had Emilio's support.
True, very true. So because my husband Emilio is an entrepreneur by nature, and for me, jumping from a big company into that was very scary. And I was thinking, oh my God, what am I leaving? I was vice president of a very large region. I basically was success, and I was like, I was doing really well,
yeah.
And it looked really scary to do that jump. And I was like, am I going to be able to do it? Because it's smaller. And at the time, Circle had raised, I think it was 50 million, and it was a team of maybe 50 people in the US mostly. And it looked small, but it's still a very, very large startup, right? So it was actually quite safe in a way to go in, but it was still very scary. So it took me time to decide if I could actually do it. And I had no finance experience. So, no
sure.
FinTech, So.
But you were the first employee in Europe.
In London, there was already a very small team in Ireland. But I was the first in London, and the Europe headquarters was becoming London. And so I had the mandate to basically scale up, set up our products, figure out the offices and how we do that. But I think the point is there is different way to get into FinTech, right? Because I get the question a lot today from people who are maybe in, bigger banks and who want to make the jump. And I think your journey to that is really interesting, because this idea of I give you my time, I help you, you have skills in a large company that are helpful, but you also need to reinvent yourself. Right? You say tone of voice. What is tone of voice?
Tone of voice, yeah.
They're like product market fit, like what?
All these acronyms, I knew. Yeah. No, absolutely. And but listen, and I just want to move on to my next question, but back to Mettle really, which is your day to day. I'm really intrigued by what it is like. I take myself back to my days at Santander, and anytime I wanted to innovate, bring a new deal, Colin. I wasn't doing neobanks like you are, but what is it like to innovate in a big bank like NatWest?
Yeah, and look, so I joined because the CEO of NatWest, Alison Rose, is a phenomenal woman who has actually a vision and understands also innovation and what she wants to do. And the way innovation has been set at NatWest, it's the best way to think about it is it's an incubator which actually has money carved out for basically having first small projects, and then you grow and you try to start to make something big out of it. So in a way, we're sheltered from the bank, and we also have, when needed, the expertise of the bank. So of course, I'm under the NatWest banking license. So there is rules that comes with that, and responsibilities and policies and so on and so forth. But we do have that expertise, and yet we're carved out, and so we work like an independent FinTech. It's not always easy, because in particular, when you start touching what you said, different ways of doing things, the conversations can actually be quite conflictual, right? Because if you look at, a legacy way of doing things, and then you come in and you have people who are, coding, cloud native technology in Kubernetes and Kafka, and basically are all running on laptops and with a different way of working, having the translation to say, we want the same thing, but how do we get there, can be quite difficult. But we've worked a lot on actually what's the best way to have governance, what's the best way for us to have, our budget safe and protected. And so one of the stress, I guess, I don't have, I have it in a different way, but which is, once I have a yearly budget and I'm set, then I know my fundraise in a way is safe, right? And in your shoes, I remember, so for Circle, it's not necessarily the same, right? Fundraising and having the ownership of the business on your shoulders can be quite tricky, right?
Without a doubt, fundraising is a chapter in itself altogether. I mean, that's why particularly in this market, right? There's such a hype from the IPOs. I think I read a statistic the other day, 80% of the IPOs in 2020 were loss making. It's as if everything's shifting, and where public investors used to come for profitable companies, and until they were profitable, private capital used to handhold them or so. Now everything's shifting to earlier stage, less proven technologies and so on and so forth. I'm not gonna. This is public knowledge. The one thing is, I think the conditions are given to go fundraise on all things tech. The story and how you tell it and how you land the story is very important. One of our investors has mentioned, look, guys, all you need to do is just not mess it up. Just continue doing what you're doing, and you're going to be okay, because there's a lot of money in the market. There's a lot of FOMO in the buy now pay later space, for example. So just keep doing what you're doing. You'll be just all right. So, but still, the stress comes with it, right?
Yeah, because it's a lot of conversation you need to have. And actually, what you said, telling your story the right way, I think and that's also one of the conversation for tonight, but being C-suite in the startup, I think, or in a fintech, you continuously need to align your investors, your stakeholders, your team, and the storytelling of what you do and how you do. It sounds simple. It's actually really, really difficult to nail that, right?
It comes back to your point of the restructuring, how it's difficult. It's difficult because of human beings behind every one of those conversations. And for us, it's not just our investors that have trusted their money on us. It's our 60 people employed by us that if we don't do things right, there's families behind us, there's my partners, and everybody involved with all stakeholders. Like you say, it all has to go together, but there's human beings behind that.
Yeah, exactly.
Relationships, emotions, and all of that. So, in a very hyped market, we have to be very concise and focused. We're going out to raise probably our Series A in the summer, sometime in July, between July and September. We're gauging the market, but we've got to start now. So
because that's another thing. It takes time, right? And I think finding the balance between you need to fundraise, but you need to keep your business running, and it's still another job that you have, and it's almost like you probably meet 10 people and one might be interested, and it takes a lot, even if the market is actually hot at the moment because there's so much capital inflow, as you said. It's still something that takes quite a lot of time, right?
So. No, without a doubt. So long as you explain, you have a business plan and you put it forward to the bank and it's approved, you count with that money. And have you got any other investors at all, external, or is it just?
Not at the moment, but those are things that we could be looking for also in the future if that comes, right? At the moment, we are 100% owned by NatWest, and therefore growing within these parameters.
Sure. No, we'll see. We'll see where time takes us. It's really very interesting time to be involved in a fintech, and fundraising has its things. The other thing I wanted to mention before, which I didn't, is it's like dating, right? You're flirting most of the time,
and then you need to find one.
and they're flirting with you because they want to be attractive to you.
Yeah.
And keep you interested and engaged until the very last minute, until they say, no, it's happened to us. I mean, we've been fundraising the whole of during COVID 2020. Thankfully, we managed to raise £5 million, but it hasn't been one big ticket. We had to do gradual bits and pieces. And like I say, some people we were on conversations for 6 to 8 weeks. They are all very sweet and warm, and then the very last day they tell you, look, we're not going to invest, I'm sorry. And you're like, what?
Yeah, and that's really hard, right? The resilience you need for that, like how do you bounce from conversations like that?
You're at home, right?
Yeah.
I need to go back home to the kids, to my wife, and emotional roller coaster is interesting.
But I think that's something also like in smaller companies, the resilience you need to have, because in startups, in smaller structure, like the high are high and the low are really low. And how do you, or even in any like scale up going fast business, right? At Mettle, we feel the same way, like the high are high and the low are low. And you're like, oh my God, it's just so much emotion. But building resilience. I don't know if you found the same thing, but I found that building resilience is super important, especially as you start leading teams, to make sure that, you know, you're consistent with what you deliver, that you're also at peace with yourself, and you know that things will go right and things won't go right, and you can, you know, keep going at it.
Without a doubt.
Because we were talking before, you know, you guys, I think, had a scary moment at some point last year, and yeah.
Yes, so we in April, when Wirecard went under, or you know, this scandal was announced in Germany, the FCA shut the UK operation down.
Yeah.
It was FCA regulated, so they had the power to just tell them. In fact, they told them, you know, Wirecard, you can't operate anymore in the UK within these boundaries, within this country or the island or the kingdom. You can't operate anymore. And so everybody who was plugged into Wirecard went dark for days. And we were, you know, like startups, things are difficult already.
Yeah, so you don't need to put that.
and then you have one of these black swans, that is. And I was quite convinced we were going to go out of business. And then, thankfully, look, I don't know, I think the UK has that's another thing that we need to touch on. I'm really keen to discuss how the UK supports startups.
Yeah.
Right? But in particular, financial institutions, the FCA came right in. They did stop them, so our cards wouldn't work for 4 days, and so wouldn't many other fintechs that had issued their card through Wirecard. But then after 4 days, they analyzed the situation and they plugged them back on and came up with a plan to run them down.
Yeah.
You know, solvent run down, it was called. They called us in all to meetings. They made us sign sort of agreements and saying that we're supporting to maintain Wirecard a going concern rather than shooting demands at them. No, we all contribute for it to be a going concern for as long as we can all transition to somewhere else.
Yes.
The brand was damaged, so it was not possible to rescue that brand anymore. But the assets were worth something, so they were going to find a buyer. And within 6 months, the transition, every debit and credit bin, so credit card bin and debit card bins, at Visa or MasterCard, over to some other issuers. And that's what's happened. In 6 months, our CTO, Nico, he's a veteran at Santander for 20 years doing ops and tech. So he's done a few of these standing up of credit card programs. We stood up a bin.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a very quick turnaround. And then we switched to Marqeta, state-of-the-art provider based in Silicon Valley. Yeah, we couldn't be better out of that, an unlucky event, really. But we're now in a great position, really. Super, super helpful position.
I think that's what you touched on, right? The vibrancy of the FinTech ecosystem. And we also partner with a lot of people, right? So out of this partner, how do you build resilience? Because at the end of the day, we're financial products, right? And so how do you build resilience while you're working with third-party suppliers who actually are themselves relying on, maybe a different cloud or different technologies and so on and so forth. And I think that's one of the things that we think about a lot. And that's one of the things, for example, where being part of a large bank is an amazing opportunity and learning, because the way the bank forces us to ensure that our providers are sound is very, very high standard, right? And I remember when I first joined, I was like, oh my God, this is too much. But actually in hindsight, I can tell when the Wirecard even happened, I was like, oh my God, it makes sense, right? It makes sense, the things that you do have to do, right? So when things come together, it's really helpful. But I think the UK ecosystem and the way the FC enables innovation and helped you navigate through that, I think I don't know if you find that in other markets, actually. It's quite unique here.
No, and equally the R&D claims, the grants. We have a grant from Innovate UK for £200,000. There's so much support to the guys. First, whoever's innovating. Secondly, if you're only starting, we're going to give you VAT rebates for as long as you bear losses. It's just in this country alone. Martin was my partner the guy with the idea, was based in New York, and he thought about starting it up in the States.
And not the same, yeah.
Or his brother Nico was here, so he came over and started up here because of the regulatory support there is. Like you say, the environment, the ecosystem was vibrant, and yet the regulators were supporting it. The other thing, EIS and
Yes,
CIS.
it helps a lot having invested. Yeah, that's also unique to the UK, right? The fact that as an angel investor, you basically have tax rebate if you invest in that, which makes the ecosystem of any successful entrepreneur or successful successful business person has the opportunity to invest and get a big tax rebate, and that helps the whole ecosystem.
It is so good like that, the UK.
Yeah,
No, we were impressed.
How are you doing on time, actually, by the way? Because we could keep chatting.
Yes, we could go on forever. But no, I guess my last point, just to ask you, is this is one for the people that the young audience out there who are wondering, I wish I could be a CEO one day, but I want to be a mom as well. Is it possible to be a mom and a CEO?
For a long time, we talked about that because I have a little boy who is 2 years old, and for a long time, I actually thought it was not possible, and I think I was self-censoring myself. Right, I was like, well, it's not possible, so it's just something I'm not going to do.
Put it off, yeah. Put it off for a few years and revisit.
Yeah, but I'm so glad, and you have 3 kids, right? And I think kids actually bring such a perspective to your life and how you do things. So yes, I need to be very organized. My husband Emilio is amazing because he's like, he's my number one cheerleader and supporter of, yes, you can do this and we'll figure out. And we do really share. Sometimes I'm wondering if he does most of the work at home, and I should put up more, but don't tell him that. But but I think it's really about where your priorities are. And yes, there are certain things maybe that I can't do as much. So not that in COVID I can go out with friends, but it's not something that I tend to do anyway quite a lot. But so it's possible, I think, and I'd be really keen to hear how you do it and how you guys do it, because you have 3 kids at home, your wife works, so it's also a full house.
Yeah, no, indeed. In fact, our eldest son was born during our second year MBA, our second year in the MBA. So yeah, we had a kid. We were a family of 3, and we didn't have an income. Neither me nor my wife was working. Look, there's always something in the middle. To have a kid or to do a trip abroad, things overlap in life. They're not digital events that you can separate from. No, you have to live with things happening. New jobs overlapping with a newborn and things. This is life. That is life. And I think we come back to the point of resilience, right?
Yes.
If you can weather that at home because you have your wife or your husband is very supportive. Again, luck plays a part, because I don't think I would have been able to make the leap from banking and shave my salary or split my salary by 4, or rather get a 4th of what I was getting before, to go and start my career or restart my career if I wasn't working, and our kids was thankfully in a public school down in Twickenham. So look, it's possible. It's very, very out there. If you're wondering where it is super possible.
But it's also and I think it's where partnership are super important, right? Because I remember, Emilio, when he did his first company, didn't pay himself, and it was and you do that as a team because it makes the other happy, fulfilled, and that's that project. And as you say, right, I think life is also its experiences, its moments, and my big lesson learned is actually the plan you write in the MBA 5 years, what are you going to do? Don't necessarily listen to that, but go with the flow and actually be attuned to the life experiences, because now we're getting older, and you see people start also leaving because they go, and life's really short. And so if you don't take that, then actually you're going to miss out. So yeah,
absolutely. Let me take a peek. I wonder. Hi, Alex.
Alex is back.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I'd come on. mean, I got some questions beforehand sent through to me, and also I have some questions that were DM'd to me. So I've just consolidated them as you guys were talking, so I didn't want to interrupt. But is now a good time to jump in, do we think, and ask some of these?
Go for it.
Perfect.
Great. So there's a variety here. I'm just trying to think about the best one to start with. There's one here that was sort of mentioned related to what you guys kind of started off with at the beginning. To what extent do you channel your own experiences of your career path when you're building out a company culture within the company that you're running? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's an amazing question, actually.
Really.
Yeah, culture, and I'm a big fan of that, because I think, you know, culture is really so much, right? Our people are our products, right? So without functioning teams and a great culture, you can't hire, you can't build a great product, and so on and so forth. And I think it's when I remember when I joined Mettle, everybody was telling me, oh, the culture is amazing. I was like, okay, what is it? And at the end of the day, what I figured out is that it's all about moments in the company. So how you do your stand-ups, how people exchange feedback, how people actually behave among themselves. Is it somewhere where you feel you can bring your whole self and you don't need to pretend to be someone else? And so the inclusivity, I think, is super important. But how would you define the culture actually at Tymit?
Look, we debate this a lot with the leadership at Tymit. It's certainly something that we're very keen, but equally at the same time, you know, growth is super important. So this always comes top in the agenda. So thankfully, we have Cynthia, our head of talent. She's brilliant. And she takes care of a lot of the little things that we tend to forget because of the day-to-day. But it's natural. I think when you're growing a business from 3 people, when we were like when I joined, to 60 we are today, and after that, COVID.
Yeah, that's hard. That's really hard.
How do you convey a message or a culture or an ethos or something that's common to everybody? And tech businesses like ours tend to attract a lot of young talent. So probably those people need it the most. You know, if you're hiring senior managers, and most of them know their way around and don't need so much guidance and coaching. But I think I like you, I like it a lot to spend time with young talents and just show them a way, or at least tell them my story. And if they can take anything valuable from that, I think that's good enough.
Yeah, but I think it's really important, and it's interesting, right? Because when you're a team who found the business, the culture is the founders, and then how do you expand that as it grows? And at Mettle, a bit of what I had was like, people were raving about the culture. I was like, okay, I just need to not fuck it up. I just need to figure out what's going on and to write it down. So I literally went across the business and asked the 80, 90 people at the time, I said, why do you love working here? Because we had amazing talent, like engineers are phenomenal. And I was just like, okay, what is it that makes you work here, right? Like, and once I was able to codify that, then I'm just making sure that, you know, growing and with COVID, it's really hard. It's exactly what you say. You don't see people. You don't know how they're doing. And one thing we found really difficult is that I don't know anymore who's struggling. Like also, you know, life at home can be really hard. You need to homeschool kids or whatever situation you're in, right? And that's what's hard, actually. It's like making sure your culture continues to strive in an environment where you don't see people anymore.
Impossible.
Thank you. That was a very full answer from both of you, so very helpful.
Okay, we'll make it short. The message, make it shorter.
No, I don't mean it in that way. Even though I'm British, I am quite direct, so I would have said it if I meant it. No, so we've got a question here that's just popped up from Georgios Sintelis. So he's actually got 2 questions. One is to Roku, to you. He said, Tymit is backed by Venture Friends, which is an Athens-based VC. Given your Spain or US or Spain/US footprint, what led you to collaborating with a Greek VC?
Yeah, really good question. I think it comes back to what we said before. In fundraising, a lot of things play a part, and some of it is almost funding. It's like a marriage, right? You need to find the right partner. And to be frank, not many people out there, not many VCs understand consumer lending. Consumer lending is a business where you yield over time, after building a book, a loans book or an asset book that we yield us some income, it's very different from a SaaS subscription-based business where people pay a fee on a monthly basis. So people first need to understand, or investors first need to understand the business model. And I tell you, yeah, not surprisingly, or at least surprisingly for me, rather, not very many people understand the consumer lending, plain consumer lending. This is vanilla, installments on a credit card, right? It's very, interest income comes in, and we pay our senior lenders. So the answer is, these people, venture friends, were the right partners at the right time. They understand our idiosyncrasies. Let's leave that. Yeah. But also, we connected very well from a person-to-person perspective, which is the other element of it, right? The human interaction element.
It's in the name, right? Venture friends.
Yes, correct.
Great, thank you, Roku. The next one is to you, Marieke. Building a FinTech within the NatWest group both leverages the NatWest tech, but also introduces coupling. If NatWest wanted to exit Mettle, I think, as a successful investment, how long would it take to decouple?
Yeah, and so I think that's the interesting thing, is that Mettle is not built on the NatWest tech. So it's actually built on the NatWest balance sheet, but not on the NatWest tech. So actually decoupling it is very easy. And what we believe in also is this banking as a service future, and it's actually a huge market. And so, yeah, the short answer is it wouldn't take long.
And can I ask a quick question there? One of the things that came up when we were studying a potential partnership with the financial institutions, a well-established European bank, they were unsure. We host everything in the cloud.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm intrigued to know what you guys have done in terms of, have they allowed you, the traditional bank techies have allowed you to host everything in the cloud?
Yes,
or not?
So they have. And actually, you see, that goes back to actually when innovation can help. I call it the mothership, right? But we are 100% cloud native based, and therefore it means going back to policies. It's been a journey for both parties, right? For us coming through making like, yeah, this makes absolute sense. And then for the bank saying, hang on, this is a world where you are in a VPN confined. So, and we've made it work, which I think is actually a huge credit to that. Yes, yes. And therefore that's why the platform is 100% cloud native, cloud based, right? So it's not only as if the bank took some of its assets and put it in the cloud. No, this is like from the ground up. So
you said it is a modular approach.
And also because the future is, as we all know, like it's you need, maybe you work with that bit here and it's connected with API to that bit here, and that needs to be replaceable in case, for example, you want to grow internationally or you want to go in another segment or another market, right? So and that's why it's so difficult for legacy bank to do that shift, because the technological shift has been so drastic that it's almost, unless you start from a blank sheet of paper, it's almost impossible, right?
No,
and you can, and it doesn't mean that traditional banks can't and shouldn't continuously improve. They have to, but on the other hand, you also have another way that's completely horizontal, which is why neobanks are so successful.
Do you get any conflicts? I don't know, but do you target the same customer base?
Great question. So we don't, and we've spent a lot of time actually making sure that we add value, right? That we attract customers that are new to NatWest, but are also a segment that is not answered. And this liquid workforce or passion economy, however you want to talk about it, is really a segment that falls through the crack, right? Because it's neither retail nor business. And so you're basically, you need something, but even when we talk to our customers, they say, I'm not a business, just something I do. And then you're like, okay, it's something you do, but it's more than just you as a person. So you basically need help with how do you invoice, how do you pay your taxes, do you have all that at hand, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where also we see we can add value, because it's basically a segment not targeted by NatWest, but it's a segment that maybe some of them will grow up and they can need a more bigger business bank account or just retail.
Alex, I've got another question.
Sorry, Alex.
No worries. Insightful. Carry on.
I'm sure that, just very quickly, I'm sure that segment of customers has suffered a lot during COVID, right?
So on one hand, yes, but on the other hand, it's also a massive growth segment, because imagine, and we see that, like, you've been furloughed, you're in your flat. Well, you've always wanted to start this business, and therefore you start this business on your laptop. So, and also here's another trend that we're seeing more and more. You should ask your team. I was actually impressed when I looked at my team, but the number of people who now have more time in their hands, they're working from home, and it's their passion to bake pies. And guess what? They've started a business out of that, or cupcakes, or whatever it is. And this side hustling, so you can still be in a job, but you have this side thing that you do. It's actually huge. Like,
Right.
it's a trend that is, and I don't think it's a trend that's going to go away. It's a trend that enables you to work from anywhere, to live your life differently, and so on and so
But
forth.
is it a liquid workforce? Or?
So we call it, so there is a technical jargon, liquid workforce, or what I prefer is actually more passion economy, because passion is really like, you like this thing, you'd love to make it your job, but maybe you're not so sure, or
Right.
or you try and today you do this one and tomorrow something else, and you see much more fluidity into how people
Sure.
work. Yeah.
Amazing.
Sorry, Alex.
The passion / creator economy is just such a, I mean, it's a very pertinent topic right now. I mean, we're seeing it everywhere, at least on my Twitter. It's like, it's all over everything, especially the kind of newsletter craze, and, you know, everyone's starting podcasts, and, you know, the kind of fragmentation of media. It's really interesting. So I think it's a good space for you guys to be focusing on.
Yeah, and it's exactly that, right? It's like people creating newsletter, podcasts. Like, it's exactly, you become your own thing and you sell your own thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And especially within, you know, industries that can be technology driven, I think it's much easier to do that now, because there are so many tools that automate things that would have previously required 3 or 4 employees in a large company. You can now do it within, you know, by yourself in your room. You're just using like 5 or 6 different software as a service tools, and run a business by yourself that sort of competes with large media brands, if that's the space you're in. It's a really interesting space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, I've got a question here, which is a sort of another double-ended one in a sense, where one, you know, for both of you coming from different backgrounds, but into FinTech. What for you, starting with you, Roku, what are the pros and cons of coming from a traditional kind of corporate banking background when looking to join an early stage FinTech?
Wow, this is a good question, and something that when we hire, and the market in general, the FinTech ecosystem is very wary of senior, or any people really coming from legacy banks, and whether they can convert themselves. So people say even that, don't get those people on their first job in FinTech, get them on their second job in FinTech, because the first landing job in FinTech is really a shock.
It's brutal.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You used to have a PA perhaps, and expenses, you travel abroad in business, and you go into an office of 3, like we were, with a quarter of your salary. It is shocking, Alex, but I think it's the drive to make that change that overcomes everything else. You just forget about your PAs, your business travel. Because especially, I tell you what, in my specific case, banking particularly investment banking, wholesale banking, is a shrinking industry right now. I think it will be. Technology will continue to press hard on trading and capital markets in general, and it feels suffocating to be part of that industry. For me, at least, I felt that I was going to end one day on the street. I knew it. Everybody knows it in banking. There's so much competition, so much. The supply is shrinking so much that for me, it was relieving to have this almost a year off between, you know, indemnity plus garden leave plus all of this, to go and start from fresh.
Figure it out.
Yeah. So I didn't. Yeah, but my will to change was a lot bigger than anything that I was leaving behind.
And, you know, from a founder's perspective, if you're hiring, like, how does it look for you if someone applies for a job from a legacy banking background, for example? Because in sales, you know, if you've got an early stage kind of pre-Series A SaaS startup, for example, and you're looking to bring someone into sales, you wouldn't necessarily look to hire someone who's worked in sales for Oracle. because their expectation of what is going to be there to enable them to sell and how easy it's going to be to find potential customers and so on is going to be completely different. So how do you look at it as a founder when you're hiring people based on their background within the financial services space?
Leave that to you.
Yeah, well, we do actually get quite a lot of people, and I'd love to get as many as we can, people coming from NatWest, because in a way you do have expertise and experience, but you need that with the right mindset, right? So for me, the winning thing is I can be looking at a CV, I don't really know, right? Because the CV can tick the boxes. I need to speak with a person and to see, do you have this fire in your belly to say, I'm going to do it differently, and I'm actually going to be maybe, faster pace, definitely faster pace, faster pace and more hands-on, but I want to do that. So I think it's as much attitude as actually skills. And I'm a huge believer of actually people reinventing themselves, right? But you need to convey that message, right? I'm committed, I want to do it, which is what you did, because it's a drastic shift, right? So I think, you can really do that, but you need to want to do it. So we do look at that, and look, for us also being a bank it's helpful. I think for me, the best when it really works is when you can bridge the two worlds together. If you only have techies, it's not going to work, because you're in a regulated environment, which, guess what? If you don't take regulation very seriously from the start, you're going to pay the price at some point.
Yeah.
But if you take it too much you're like a bank, then you're never going to be able to, you're going to already have the frame of like, no, cannot, right? So when it's at its best is at having the two. So I need a breed of both, but I need attitude, right? That's the first and foremost thing.
I was going to say, I'm surprised by your answer. I want to always give the benefit of the doubt. I didn't know you were going to just say what you said, because I made a switch. I want to allow other people, give them the benefit of the doubt, and just trial them, and all right, come talk to us, interview, and even come do an internship with us. I think there's a lot of value in it. You can reinvent yourself. You definitely can.
But it's attitude, right? If someone comes and say, look, I've done this, I've done that, I see how I can apply myself to you, right? Also, something I think is really helpful for people looking to make the transition, which I often say is, one is help pro bono, which is what you did, right? But I think it's so smart. Help pro bono, but also research the company for which you want to work and say, look, my experience is I've done this, that. I think I can help with this, that, right? The more you put yourself in the shoes and you do the translation, which is back to attitude, right? I really want that. So I show, and then, give the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
Open up the door, because actually it's the bridge of both that will go
Without
somewhere.
a doubt. Super agree.
Thanks for your answers on that one. I think we've probably got time for at least one more. So I'll take this one here, because it's back into the shoes of the person sort of seeking the job. How important, and you guys talked about this a little bit more, I think it was Roku that you mentioned, during your MBA, the career, the people in the careers department at LBS said, what would you want your career to be in 10 years? So this question is, how important do you think it is to map out your desired career path versus taking each opportunity as it comes?
Yeah, fair enough. Good question. I think there is. Look, I'm not very methodic. Listen, I've got a CFO role, so I have to be somewhat methodic. But I wouldn't say my life is super structured. Okay, and still, I do like the idea of planning out, at least, jot down what your ideas are. I'm a firm believer of whiteboards and how whiteboards help align and organize ideas for products or marketing, whatever it may be. For your career, it's exactly the same. Grab a sheet of paper, put down a few things that are important for you, and that will help for everything else that isn't so much important. First off, you start ranking stuff, because this is mental accounting. One has all these desires in life, but the minute you start writing them down, you sort of tend to do them in order. And then write down the ones that you don't like about your current job, or writing is very powerful, and drawing in particular, or even is very powerful. So yes, I'm not the spontaneous that would take chances as they come. Well, look, I took my chance with Tymit. Thankfully, I had done my planning, Could I have done? Yeah, could I have taken the job I took at Tymit without having planned it? Yes, but I'm inclined to say
I like your answer. I think for me, it's all about life is about figuring out who we are, right, and what makes you you, and what makes you actually happy and in sync. And I had actually a big realization a couple of years ago on that. I'm like, okay, hang on, like, you know, you're on this like path, but where are you about? And I think, and it's a continuous journey, right? So I write a lot, actually, every day, every night I write stuff on what's the good thing, because I think sometimes we forget that life is actually really good. So I write about what's good, but also about what is it that's important to you, right? Because I think actually if you have that in check, then it's not really the career plan per se, because I think actually a career plan can be disappointing, right? You might want to be something and you don't do that, but is that you, or actually, you know, is your path and your calling something different? And I think that's a lifelong journey, like the figuring out what you're good at, what you enjoy, what you really want to do, and you, not like, you know, not your parents, not your friends, not that, because also we are in a world where, you know, it's a like on here and a like on that, and everybody likes what you do, and you might be like, do I like what I do?
Yeah.
So rather than the career thing, it's more, this is your life. And so who are you? What are you good at? What do you want to do? Map that out in the way you've said, which is write it, because we don't do, I think, especially nowadays, we don't do enough self-introspection. And it starts with that. The clearer you are, the more you can also give back to others and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. Spot on.
Just when you were saying that, I was just thinking, you know, the phrase "all roads lead to Rome," but obviously you have to know that you're going to Rome first. So it's like having a bit of an idea of where you're actually trying to get, and then being flexible in how you get there. I think it's kind of like the summary of your two answers, or at least that's how I've interpreted it.
Yeah, it is. But I think my point is also, maybe you might think it's Rome, but it might be Paris. And I think sometimes and I say that because, you know, I'm French, I've been educated in a system which is like, you have to go through those schools. And at some point you wake up, you're like, hang on, I've been on that. And actually, I left, I went to China because I was like, this is not me. I need to completely leave. So I think the point is, it's really great if you know that it's Rome, phenomenal, and then be open to, because all roads lead to Rome, but it might not be Rome, and you might be on the wrong track. So
yeah. Well, we've come up to the hour, so I want to just say thank you thank you so much to both of you. A really fascinating discussion, obviously, two really interesting companies, and you know, really interesting to hear how you got to where you are now, and I think very helpful to be able to field some of the questions from the audience as well at the end. So thank you so much for your time, and I've really enjoyed the first ever kind of hybrid event we've had through this platform.
Yes.
Good
We're coming back slowly
next to each other, and I'm looking forward to being able to do the same soon. So thanks so much again for your time, and thanks to everyone watching, and anyone who watches the recording back. We'll be hoping to have more of these events, so look out on the chapter page for anything else that comes up soon. Thanks, everyone.
Excellent.
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.